You've seen the headlines. The global debt clock, ticking relentlessly upwards. The total stands at over $315 trillion. A number so vast, it becomes an abstraction. It is more than 3 times the value of the entire world economy. You hear about the United States with a national debt exceeding $38 trillion, a figure that overshadows its entire economic output. You hear about Japan. Its debt is 2.5 times its economy. A demographic time bomb in a low-growth world. You hear about Europe, wrestling with its own $14 trillion mountain of promises. Every major economy is seemingly drowning in an ocean of red ink. And in your mind, a simple, logical question forms. A question that cuts through all the noise. If everyone owes money, who do they owe it to? Is there some shadowy, ultra-wealthy entity? A single global creditor? The most fundamental rule of finance is simple. For every debtor, there must be a creditor. But when the debtor is the entire world, that logic begins to fracture. And the truth is profoundly unsettling. The answer is not a who. The answer is a what. To find it, we must journey back to a single decision, made in secret. On a quiet Sunday afternoon in 1971, a decision that tore up the financial rulebook and created the world we live in today. For a time, debt had an anchor, a physical anchor. It was heavy. It was shiny. It was gold. After World War II, the world's leaders met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their goal was to build a system that would prevent another Great Depression. They designed a new framework for global money. America, holding most of the world's gold, would anchor it. The US dollar would be the world's reserve currency. And the dollar itself was anchored to gold. The price was fixed. $35 for 1 ounce of gold. This system created a natural break on debt. Money was a physical promise. A claim check for a specific weight of gold in a vault in Fort Knox. A country couldn't just print infinite money. Its power was tethered to a finite physical object. Of course, countries still borrowed. But there was always an ultimate backstop. Gold. If a creditor nation grew suspicious of America's spending, it could demand its gold back. This threat, this possibility of a run on the bank, acted as a powerful disciplinarian. The world's financial system was on a golden leash. But leashes are designed to be strained. In the post-war world, everyone wanted dollars. They were the lifeblood of international trade, as good as gold, but far more practical. This gave America what a French finance minister called an exorbitant privilege. It could buy real goods and import real resources from the world, simply by printing paper. But in the 1960s, America's spending began to spiral. President Johnson's guns and butter policy. The guns, for a costly and divisive war in Vietnam. The butter, for massive domestic social programs. The U.S. government was printing money to pay for both, pumping billions of new dollars into the global economy. Dollars that were, in theory, backed by a finite amount of gold. Other countries started to do the math, led by a skeptical President Charles de Gaulle in France, who saw the system as a form of American economic imperialism. They began to doubt. They saw the American promise not as a guarantee, but as a ticking time bomb. So they began calling America's bluff. They exchanged their surplus dollars for U.S. gold. As was their right, the gold began to hemorrhage from American vaults. The golden leash was about to snap. August 1971. A secret weekend meeting at Camp David. President Nixon and his advisors faced a terrifying reality. The global run on the dollar was accelerating. The British ambassador had requested $3 billion worth of gold. America was on the verge of defaulting on its promise to the world. On Sunday evening, August 15th, Nixon appeared on television. He sent a shockwave across the planet. He unilaterally, and without warning his allies, severed the link between the dollar and gold. Temporarily, he said. A word chosen to calm the markets. Temporarily meant forever. The gold window was slammed shut. In that instant, the very definition of money changed. For everyone. It was no longer a claim check for a physical thing. It became pure fiat currency. Money that has value, simply because a government says it does. The natural break on debt creation was not just released. It was utterly shattered. This brings us back to our mystery. With the gold anchor gone, who stepped in? The answer is not a single entity. It is a three-headed hydra. First, the creditor is us. A huge portion of a country's debt is owned by its own people and institutions. Your pension fund has a legal fiduciary duty to ensure it can pay you in 30 years. To meet that future liability, it needs a safe, long-term asset. A 30-year government bond is the perfect match. Insurance companies, money market funds, and commercial banks all operate on the same logic. A country owes money to its own future. We are the first creditor. Second, the creditors are each other. This is the direct result of global trade. Nations like China and Japan sell real goods to the US, and, in return, they get trillions of dollars. Oil exporting nations in the Middle East do the same. They must do something with that cash to manage their own currency's value, so they recycle it, buying US Treasury bonds. It is a symbiotic, if unbalanced, relationship. America gets to finance its deficits. Creditor nations get a stable market for their exports. It is a global web of interlocking IOUs. But this still doesn't solve the paradox. If we owe it to ourselves and to each other, how can the total debt keep growing? This brings us to the final, most powerful creditor of all. The 2008 financial crisis. The fiat system was pushed to the brink of collapse. The web of debt froze. The machine ran out of money. Imagine your credit card is maxed out. You can't pay the bill. But then, you discover a magic checkbook connected to a phantom bank account that you own. You write a check from this magic account to pay your credit card bill. The debt is paid. But with money you simply willed into existence. You've solved your problem, but you've also broken the very concept of money. Now, scale that idea up to the entire global economy. In a moment of desperation, a solution once considered taboo was deployed on a massive scale. Quantitative easing, QE. And in that moment, the final creditor revealed itself. The most mysterious creditor of all is a country's own central bank. Here is the trick, the ghost in the machine. The government needs money, so it issues bonds. The central bank then creates brand new money digitally out of thin air. It uses this new money to buy the government's bonds from large commercial banks. This floods those banks with fresh reserves, encouraging them to lend, and indirectly finances the government. Before 2008, the US Fed's balance sheet was under $1 trillion. After multiple rounds of QE, it swelled to nearly $9 trillion. The Bank of Japan now owns over half of all Japanese government debt. The creditor is a reflection in the mirror, a perpetual motion machine for debt. So, if every country is in debt, who is the creditor? The answer is not a person. It is a system. Takeaway 1. The creditors are us. Citizens and institutions searching for future safety. Takeaway 2. The creditors are each other. A circular web of global trade, locking everyone into the same system. Takeaway 3. The ultimate creditor is the machine itself. Central banks. Creating money from nothing to buy their own government's debt. And here's the final, shocking truth. This system depends on one terrifying reality. The debt must never be fully repaid. To actually pay off the US national debt would be catastrophic. It would mean removing $38 trillion of the world's premier safe asset from the system. Pension funds would be wiped out. The global financial system would collapse into a deflationary spiral. It would make the Great Depression look like a minor correction. The goal is not repayment. The goal is to keep refinancing. Forever. We are living inside the greatest monetary experiment in human history. An experiment with no control group and no clear endgame. The real question is not who is the creditor. It is, what happens when the world loses faith in the promises of the machine? That is a question history has yet to answer. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe for more deep dives into financial history. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Is this a stable system or the biggest bubble in history? Thank you for watching.